Welcome! In this explainer, we're taking a close, analytical look at a specific portion of the Quran, verses 75 through 81 of Surah An-Naml, also known as the ant. We'll be breaking down the classical commentary on these verses, piece by piece, to understand the deep theological arguments being made.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We've got 6 key themes, each pulled directly from the source material. We'll start with the big picture claims about reality and knowledge, and from there, we'll build our way up to the ultimate questions of divine judgment and human accountability.
Okay, let's start with our source document. This right here is a detailed commentary, an exegesis, on the exact verses we're studying today. Everything we're about to discuss is drawn directly from this interpretation, so think of this as the foundation for our entire analysis.
We're kicking things off with a foundational claim made right in these verses. And this one? It's a big one. It underpins everything else we're going to talk about, because it gets at the very nature of divine knowledge and the fabric of reality itself.
Verse 75 is our launching point. It introduces this concept of a clear book, in the original Arabic, Kitab Mubin. Now, the source exegesis is very specific here. This isn't just a physical book with pages. It's a metaphor for a perfect, all-encompassing divine record. And when it says all-encompassing, it means everything. Not just what you can see and touch, but every hidden thing, every secret thought, every possible future across all of existence. This idea is absolutely crucial because it establishes God's total omniscience. That concept becomes the bedrock for everything that follows: justice, destiny, and the proof of resurrection.
That idea of a complete divine record leads us right into our next subject, the concept of resurrection after death. In Arabic, this is known as ma'ad, and it's a central point of debate in this text. The source text really hammers this home. The argument over resurrection isn't some minor theological squabble. No, it's a cornerstone of the entire Quranic message and a primary point of conflict with those who reject it. Why? Because it directly challenges a worldview that says this material life is all there is. The commentary specifically points us to 2 key chapters where this theme is front and center: Surah Al-Mu'minun, or the Believers, and of course, right here in Surah An-Naml.
Now this is interesting. The commentary highlights a very specific argument that keeps popping up from the deniers. This phrase, legends of the former peoples, is their way of brushing off the whole idea of resurrection, and it appears in both Surah Al-Mu'minun and again here in Surah An-Naml. According to the source, this repetition is significant. It shows a persistent, historical rejection of this core belief. It's a rhetorical trick, really, trying to frame the promise not as a future reality, but as just another old, unprovable myth.
But here's where the source commentary draws a really crucial distinction. In Surah Al-Mu'minun, the argument is mostly defensive. It's focused on refuting the deniers, on pushing back against their claims. But here, in Surah An-Naml, the strategy completely shifts. It's no longer just about defense, it's about going on offense. The focus isn't just on countering disbelief, but on actively proving the reality of resurrection, connecting it all the way back to God's original power to create. This shift from refutation to affirmation is a big deal. It suggests a more assertive, confident presentation of the argument.
Okay. This all brings us to our next theme, and it connects right back to that clear book we started with. We're going to dive into the concept of ghaib, or the unseen, because you really can't grasp the nature of divine knowledge without it. So, what is ghaib? The source defines it with incredible precision. This isn't just knowing some hidden things, like what might happen tomorrow. No, this is the total, absolute, comprehensive knowledge of the inner reality of all things that are hidden from creation. And the exegesis is emphatic. This kind of knowledge, in its pure and absolute form, belongs to God and God alone. It's not just something he has, it's part of his very essence.
And here's the crucial distinction the source details for us. You might think, well, don't prophets and imams know things about the unseen? And yes, they do. But their knowledge is fundamentally different. It's a delegated knowledge. Think of it as a gift, a portion that God reveals to them for a specific purpose. It's not inherent to who they are. God's knowledge, ilm al-ghaib, on the other hand, is absolute and intrinsic. He is the knower of the unseen, alam al-ghaib. And the text anchors this entire argument right in verse 65 of this same surah, which states it plainly: none knows the unseen except Allah.
So if you have this concept of God's absolute knowledge and his revealed word, the next logical question is, what's its practical role in society? Well, our analysis now shifts to exactly that, looking at how the text presents the Quran as a unifying force, a final judge.
Verse 76 gives the Quran a very specific job description, you could say. It's presented as an arbiter, a hakam, specifically for the children of Israel. The commentary explains that this verse is making a bold claim, that the Quran has the authority to step in and resolve long-standing theological and historical arguments within that community. It can provide the definitive judgment and clarify points they've been debating for centuries.
But according to the exegesis, this unifying mission is really a two-part process. On one hand, for communities like the people of the book, it's a clarifying text, but its first and foremost call to unity is directed inward, to the Muslim community itself. The principle laid out in the source is clear. Before the Quran can be a judge for others, it has to be the foundational unifier for its own followers, calling them to come together around its core principles.
So if the Quran is meant to be this great unifier and guide, it raises a huge question, right? What's the dynamic between the divine guidance it offers, the prophet who delivers it, and our ability as humans to actually receive it? That's exactly where our analysis is headed next.
Verse 77 is pretty straightforward. It describes the Quran as both guidance and mercy. But, and this is a big but, the source text tells us to pay very close attention to those last three words, for the believers. This is not a throwaway line. The exegesis argues that while the Quran's potential for guidance and mercy is universal, its benefit is only actualized for those who have faith. Belief, in this view, is the necessary ingredient, the spiritual state of being receptive enough to actually download that guidance and experience its mercy.
And this leads us into a series of incredibly powerful metaphors in verses 80 and 81. The source commentary couldn't be clearer. When these verses talk about the dead, the deaf, and the blind, they are not talking about physical conditions. Not at all. These are metaphors for spiritual states. The dead are those whose hearts are spiritually shut down, completely closed off to the truth. The deaf aren't just people who can't hear. The text says they turn their backs while the call is being made. That's a deliberate act of rejection. And the blind are those who are so lost in their own confusion that they can't be let out. It's all about a willful internal choice to not see reality as it's being presented.
So the conclusion the exegesis draws from this is profound. The ability to truly hear the divine message isn't about your ears, it's about your heart. It's a kind of spiritual perception, one that's unlocked only by belief in God's signs and a state of submission. Without that internal readiness, the message, no matter how loud or clear, just can't get through.
And that brings us to our final section, where everything we've been talking about, spiritual perception, creation, divine knowledge, it all comes together and points toward the inevitable conclusion promised in the text: death, resurrection, and the final judgment.
Verse 78 is presented as the absolute guarantee of this final judgment. And the commentary tells us to look closely at the two divine attributes mentioned here. God is Al-Aziz, the exalted in might. That means he has the absolute power to make his judgment happen and enforce it. And he is Al-Alim, the all-knowing. That means his judgment will be based on perfect, complete information, ensuring it's absolutely just. Think about it. Might without knowledge could be tyrannical, and knowledge without might would be powerless. The combination of the two guarantees a perfect and inescapable final reckoning.
And the source text brings us back to this point, reinforcing a really important limitation. It emphasizes that even the prophet himself cannot force guidance on someone who chooses to be spiritually blind. The text argues that the ultimate responsibility falls on the individual's will to see, to hear, to perceive. Guidance is offered, but it has to be accepted.
So, faced with all this rejection, what's the instruction? Verse 79 gives the answer. Put your complete trust and reliance in God. And the reason? Because the messenger is on the path of al-Haqqil Mubin, the clear, manifest truth. The commentary explains that this means the truth of the message is self-evident. Its validity isn't dependent on how many people accept it. It's absolute whether people choose to see it or not.
And this brings us to the final, provocative question that the logic of this entire exegesis leaves us with. It perfectly ties together every theme we've just walked through: divine knowledge, resurrection, guidance, and judgment. If the ability to hear the call to salvation is a spiritual capacity that's unlocked by belief, then what is the inevitable fate of those who choose to remain spiritually dead, deaf, and blind all the way up to the moment of their physical death? The text leaves that question hanging as the ultimate consequence of human choice.